Hello Rowenna. So you've been chosen as the Labour candidate for Southampton Itchen, replacing John Denham, who is a pretty big deal. He's a cabinet minister and at one point was even considered could one day be Prime Minister. So these are some pretty big shoes to fill. How are you feeling?
I am absolutely honoured and excited to be following John Denham. He's been an amazing MP for 21 years. And if you go knocking up and down on the doors of this city, everybody knows his name, everybody respects him. He's particularly respected when I was starting my career. I remember watching him resign over Iraq, and to be able to have the courage to do that and the conviction to do that and to hold your red lines, I think is something that this city has never forgotten. And I feel really proud to be working after him. And something he said to me was that he'd mentor me until the next election and then afterwards as well. So hopefully I can continue benefiting from his good practice.
Now, he used to hold the seat with a majority of thousands, but now it's gone down to a majority of less than 200. Is that a concern for you?
Mm-hmm. You can never be complacent in politics. So he has held the seat for 21 years, and I believe this city is Labour, not least because when you go on the doorstep, people share the values that they're talking about. They care about the same things that I do, about jobs, about wages, about education, about housing. And so I do believe the city has Labour values and that Labour will win again. But it's true to say that majority has gone down. It went down partly because the boundaries changed at the last election, and it went down partly because you'd had 3 terms of a Labour government. And now I think it's time for change again. But that's not to be complacent. There's a lot of really, really hard work to be done to earn people's trust. I'm a new candidate. People have to get a chance to get to know me. And I think perhaps running some more grassroots campaigns in a slightly different way might be a really good way to win people's trust back, but perhaps we can talk about that in a minute.
But it could be considered that your biggest competition during this election will be the Conservative Royston Smith. Is he a concern for you?
I've met Royston Smith. I knocked on his door when I was just campaigning in Pear Tree the other day, and he seemed like a very pleasant man. But ultimately, I don't think that he is what this city needs, and he's already been rejected by Southampton. He used to be the Conservative leader of the council, and then he was chucked out because he couldn't handle an industrial dispute. I don't think that this man can govern, and I don't think that he shares the values of compassion and value that this city really has, and therefore he's someone I will respect and I'll take very seriously, but I don't fear him. In fact, I would relish the chance to be able to debate with him and talk with him and have those debates out in public.
Now, you've got a lot going for you, but you've got one thing going against you in Southampton, and this is your links with Portsmouth. So, say there was a football match and Portsmouth was playing Southampton, which colours would you be wearing?
I would absolutely be wearing Southampton colours, always. And you know, it's quite interesting because my dad lives in Portsmouth now, and he lives and it's only like 15 minutes by train. But you're right, it does feel like there's a competitive culture there. But I think it's a healthy competition, and you know, one of the ways that you can do better as a region is if you have that healthy competition between cities. And also when you have collaboration. Like I'm sure you've heard about the City New Deal, where Southampton and Portsmouth are coming together to win government money and to invest in new jobs that will benefit the whole area. And ultimately what we should be thinking about is how Southampton and Portsmouth and Britain and British ports compete with the rest of the world, and not just how Southampton and Portsmouth have to have a rivalry.
Now, some people don't like it when parties parachute in candidates like they did with John O'Farrell in the Eastleigh by-election. Do you think this is going to be damaging to your campaign?
Oh, I wasn't parachuted into Southampton Itchen, and I don't believe that John O'Farrell was parachuted into Eastleigh. The way I run the selection this summer was through sheer hard work. I went and lived with an 86-year-old lady called Barbara in her bungalow, who's a Labour Party member, who lives on Dean Road in Southampton. And I met her through the Labour Party, and she said to me, you know, Rowenna, if you want to be the candidate here, you have to show that you're really serious about it. And to show commitment, I suggest you move into my home for the next 6-9 months. Give up everything you've ever known, give up your work, and just show that this city is what you care about and this is what you believe in. And so I did, and I went and lived with this old lady for months and months and months, and spent my time meeting people and earning their trust by cycling around on my bike in the rain, meeting Labour Party member after Labour Party member to explain what I was about and what I wanted to do with them and for Southampton. And then they chose me, and they chose me in a democratic election where the turnout was higher than any selection, including all of Labour's leadership selections, with the result that was more than any other candidate had put together. And so I'm really proud of that. I'm nothing to be ashamed of, and I deny that I've ever been parachuted in. I'm here because of my hard work and because of my values.
But you're not particularly local. You've grown up in London, you've got family from Portsmouth, you're not actually from Southampton, whereas someone like Royston Smith, he is Southampton through and through. So do you not think that's going to make people sway their vote if they'd rather vote for someone local rather than someone that's just sort of come from nowhere and has lived there for a few months?
I believe the people of Southampton will choose the best person for Southampton, and that doesn't matter where you come from. And sure, you've got to earn your trust. Like I've written since I was selected to every single school, every single business and every single voluntary organisation that I have links for, to go and meet them and work with them and get to know them. And actually some of the times when I go and visit those schools and hospitals, I find that Royston Smith hasn't been there, but I have. And so being local is not enough. What is enough is being a really good candidate who cares about the area, who makes the effort to meet local people, who has the right values, who will get the best deal for Southampton and Westminster when they go and fight for them every day. And to me, that doesn't matter where you come from. That's about who you are and what you believe in. And I think Southampton will judge us on that basis.
Now, Ed Miliband has released his plans for the living wage. Do you think this is a realistic solution?
So this morning, before I came here, I was at Solent University campaigning with cleaners for them to be able to pay the living wage. At the moment, they're paid £6.31 an hour. That is crazy. Like, if they work for a day, they can barely afford to go out for a meal in the evening and pay their heating and energy bills, it's just insane what we're asking people to live on. And the living wage is part of that solution. The other things that I think are part of that solution are attacking the cost of living directly through, for example, Ed Miliband's campaigning on the energy companies, more recently on the water companies that you're hearing about this week. It is a wonderful policy, the living wage, because it says if you put in a hard day's work, you and your family should not have to live in poverty. And so it can't be all of the answer, but I'm really proud that Labour's supporting it as part of the answer.
But is it really realistic for all businesses? Okay, bigger businesses, bigger companies would be able to possibly afford to do this, but what about the smaller businesses? Is it realistic for them to be able to try and implement this?
So the first thing to point out is that the living wage wouldn't be introduced as a mandatory piece of legislation across the board for all companies. So it wouldn't be the minimum wage. What Ed Miliband has said is those companies who move from the minimum wage to a living wage in the first 12 months of a Labour government would get a tax break. That tax break could be paid for by increased national insurance contributions from higher wages and lower benefits bills. So if you were a business who decided to up your wages, and you don't have to under Labour's scheme, but if you did decide to, you would get the benefit of a tax break afterwards. So I think it is fair to say that this works for businesses as well as for workers.
With the Ford factory closure and the loss of manufacturing in Southampton, there's less sort of stereotypical Labour voters in Southampton now. Do you think that's fair to say?
No, I don't think it is. I think the loss of Ford following the loss of Vosper Thornycroft and the loss of Pirelli is tragic for the city and for the families and the workers who have given so much to work so hard in the jobs that they like. And I think one of the things that a good MP for Southampton would do would be to help bring back some of that industry and that job creation in the city. In terms of whether that loses your voters, those people haven't disappeared from Southampton. They still live in their houses, they still have other jobs, and Labour Party is still going to be reaching out to them no matter where they work. And Labour Party has an obligation to reach out to those communities, but it also has an obligation to reach out to different demographics as well. Ed Miliband has talked about being a one nation party, a party for everyone, not just one stereotypical group.
Now, during my time in Eastleigh, during the Eastleigh by-election, a big thing that kept coming up was immigration. And during my interview with Diane James last week, she said that the big parties aren't doing enough to tackle this. The Daily Express have launched their campaign to try and stop immigration. So what are your views on it? What are you planning to do to tackle immigration?
So Southampton is a port town. It's built on waves of immigration, from the Huguenots onwards, just years and years and years of it. But something changed in the year 2000 when we let in European migrants. and that was that Southampton's population went from increased by 6% in just a few years. And that was a massive increase for the city. And the problem is that if you have an increase of migrants so quickly and so many, it does put pressure on services, hospitals, schools, housing, which haven't seen the similar increase in the funding that they need to help integrate migrants into our community. And so I think we have to say, look, we need transitional controls on the migrants that do come to Britain. Migration can help Britain. The jobs that people do in like the hospitals and our schools, so much of it built on migrant labour is important. But you can't let people in, so many people in so quickly that it puts pressure on resources and causes tension in communities. And so I would say we should do something a bit like Germany has done when they opened up their borders, which is to have transitional controls in place that keep an eye on the numbers that are coming in and let in a smaller number of people over a longer period of time.
Okay, but Royston Smith has previously criticised Labour government for underestimating the impact that immigration has had on the UK.
Yeah, I would share some of the concerns that Royston Smith has. I think that, like I said, if you bring too many people in too quickly, people can feel tense, and it doesn't make them racist to feel tense or worried about their school places or whether there's enough English language places for everybody. And so I would share Royston Smith's concerns over that. But I don't think the answer is what Royston Smith's Conservative Party are advocating, which seems to be to scapegoat migrants for a lot of bigger problems, often problems that his party are causing: not enough housing, not enough decent wages. Those are the issues that I think Labour Party can address. And if we can, we'll make people feel much more comfortable with immigration. So just to take one example briefly, if we had a living wage in Southampton and we were a proper living wage city, people wouldn't be scared that their wages would be competed down by migrants too low to the point when they can't even feed their families. You know, that is the kind of policy that Labour would advocate to help deal with some of the tensions of immigration that the Conservative Party wouldn't even consider.
Now, you're a highly Oxford-educated Guardian journalist. How could you possibly relate to your average Tesco worker in Southampton?
I didn't come from a rich family at all. My grandma was the first one to go to, the first one to go to school in our family, and left school at 14. And I was brought up in a comprehensive school in inner city London. I was really lucky by working hard that I got to Oxford. And I'm so proud of that. And I'm so proud of my other friends from state school who worked hard with me to get in. And the first job I did was stuffing envelopes. You know, I'm here because I worked hard, and I'm really proud of that. And I'm really proud of my education. And I think you also have to think, what do you do with that education? You know, if you feel like you've been lucky enough to get those opportunities, then how are you going to give something back? How are you going to contribute? How are you going to bring other people up the ladder with you? And I spend my time every Wednesday working in the food bank in Bitton Park Triangle next to where I live. I spent this morning with the cleaners at Solent University listening to them and what their work is like. I give up a lot of my time to work with and alongside people from all kinds of backgrounds, and I've never had a problem relating with them. I'm really, really proud to work with them.
Now, young people and a lot of people who will be watching this don't vote. So why should they vote? If not particularly for you, but why should they vote at all?
It's a problem that I really worry about a lot. Like in even the last election, I think the voter turnout for Southampton was something like 60%. And that means 40% of people aren't having their voice heard. I think the first thing that politicians can do is go and listen to young people. So like I've been going around to schools throughout the city and saying, like, look, tell me what the Labour Party needs to be doing. What can we be doing differently? And so often what I hear back is all the parties are the same. They don't have anything different between them, so why bother going to the polling station? But I'm trying to point out to them that the Labour Party was the party that gave us the minimum wage and the party that gave us the NHS. And if someone had voted Conservative back in the day, they wouldn't have those things. And the Labour Party that I want to be part of would be part of that kind of radical agenda that made a difference to people's lives. And when you have the conversation about some of the policies that Labour has, a lot of people will go, actually, you know what, that is the thing I care about. You know, for example, like Labour said at the last conference that they'd work up to building 200,000 new homes a year. Now that is going to make a difference. You know, it really, really is. And I think that you just got to hope that if if you work with young people and you include them in that project, not just as consumers but as leaders, like it'd be fantastic to have a bigger Labour students movement, that they might feel like that they own the project and that they can help lead it and create it, and ultimately vote for it.
Now, moving away from politics and more towards media, as a trainee journalist, my lecturers are constantly saying how important it is to have neutrality. So how could you possibly be objective as a journalist when you're running for being an MP?
I don't work as a reporter anymore on news journalism at all, because
that
of what you're saying.
So that's a move you chose to make because you became a politician. You chose to step down from your journalism career.
Yeah. So I do commentating now. So I go on Sky News a lot and do like opinion pieces. I write for the New Statesman, where I have a blog, which is like my personal opinion. And then I occasionally do the odd feature piece for different things, but nothing on party politics explicitly for those kind of features. And when I do like my blogging pieces for The Statesman, it's always with an agenda, and I'm proud of that agenda, and I state my role so everybody who reads my work can judge. And actually, I really like that form of journalism. So I do a lot of campaigning journalism now. For example, the other day I had a campaign against the spread of betting shops in our communities. And I was worried that they were letting in too many young people, allowing them to bet underage, and obviously developing gambling addictions and debt problems as a result. So I got a bunch of young people from my community together, and I said, right, let's write this article together. You help me go out to every betting shop, you know, across the community, and you see if you can place a bet even though you're under 18. And do you know what? Over half of them could place the bets. And they helped me write the article, and they got credits in the article. And as a result, it got published in The Sun on a double-page spread, and they were really proud that they'd got their names in there, and the gambling companies were publicly humiliated and decided to put all of their staff on much more rigorous training programs as a result. Now that is a form of campaigning journalism. It comes with a political agenda, and I love it. I really, really like it. And of course it's political, but as long as you state who you are and what you believe in, I think that's okay. There's a place for that.
Okay. So as a journalist or an ex-journalist, Ed Miliband has announced his support for the Royal Charter. What's your view on press regulation?
Where I agree most with Ed Miliband on this is that we live in an age which has a very overly concentrated media industry. You know, we had a situation where Murdoch was owning a huge percentage of the British press, and that is a threat to me on press freedom. Like, to have true press freedom, you need diversity, you need loads of voices from loads of different agendas and perspectives, you know, having their say. So anything that would help break the cartel of, you know, media giants in this country, I think would be quite helpful. Where I agree with him less is on the Charter. As a journalist myself, I've always thought that freedom of press is paramount, and people should be allowed to have their say without being fearful of the state. And so I will disagree with him slightly there, but the party knows my views on this, and ultimately, you know, you have to have your say within the party.
Now, the Daily Mail recently went after Ed Miliband in quite a big way regarding his father. What were your views on that whole episode?
I thought that was completely unfounded. I thought that what the Mail were doing really let down their own values. Like, I like the Mail. The Mail is a campaigning paper. The Mail's a paper that would fight for, you know, like better wages and, you know, like lower prices in terms of the cost of living for ordinary people. But when they chose to attack Ed Miliband and his father, they did it with unfounded claims. So they said that Ed Miliband's father hated Britain when Ed Miliband's father served in the armed forces for Britain. And they based their allegations on, I think, one diary entry that his father had made, you know, when he was a teenager. And so I thought it was ungrounded and unfair, and it let down the Mail's values of like family and the armed forces. That said, I thought that Ed Miliband's response to it was exactly right. He didn't say, okay, that's it, you should be censored, you shouldn't be allowed to say those things. He just used his personal platform to say, I think that was wrong of you to say those things, and to publicly shame the Mail rather than to go through the state and use any form of censorship. So I was really proud of his response, and I was disappointed in the Mail that day.
Now, as my final question, as a very successful, attractive young woman, why on earth would you want to get involved in the messy world of politics?
Because I believe we can make a difference here. Like, I really do. On some level, you're born and then you die, and it's what you do in between that counts. And there is so much talent in Southampton and in Britain that gets wasted all the time because of poverty, because of inequality, because of injustice. And I hate that. I hate that. It makes me furious. And when you've been involved in campaigns like I have, where you've helped turn around the betting shop industry, or you've helped like promote the living wage, and you see the difference that makes to people's lives, and you see a different way that things can be, that is inspiring, that is motivating, and you can't get enough of it. And I have met a lot of really good people in Southampton who I really want to work with, who I know can help me make a difference here. And I'm really just very, very proud to have the opportunity.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.